Just because it's smaller doesn't make it any less capable. That's what my girlfriend tells me, but also what you can say about the first generation of BMW 1 Series, also known as the E8X platform. Now, we're located in the States where we only got the E82 Coupe and E88 Vert, so that's mostly what you're going to find in this guide. But if you live across the pond, you got a whole bunch of cooler options, maybe one of those 3 or 5 door hatchback models like the E81 or E87. In this case, you can still take this info and apply it to your car. The fitment is the same. The second gen F2X also shares similar fitment, although there's a few subtle differences, so I'll make a separate guide on that. They're really the only ones that are left over those third gens, the front wheel drive ones. You pay the BMW tax to get a Volkswagen experience. If this is you, no shame, maybe check out our Jetta fitment guide for inspiration instead of this one. Now after that tangent, let's get back to the matter at hand, the E8X. Before we look at what fits, here are the basics that you need to know. The basic fitment info, well, this is rocking a 5x120 bolt pattern with an M12x1.5 lug bolt, center bore of 72.6 and lug torque of 89 foot-pounds. There's a ton of different wheel options these cars can come with. They're BMWs after all, that's kind of their thing. In stock form, you get staggered wheels, 17s or 18s, and 7 to 8.5 inches wide. Offsets are the higher 40s or low 50s, and they weigh about 24 pounds in the front and 26 in the rear, which is pretty respectable for a stock wheel. Now getting into recommended aftermarket wheel specs. Well, so what specs are common for aftermarket wheels on these cars? The go-to size is 18 inches, although 17 and 19 also work really well. You're gonna want wheels 1 inch to 1.5 inches wider than stock, for instance 8.5, 9.5. For flush fitment, offsets are 35 to 50, with the rears getting a higher offset wheel. Now note that if you're looking to apply this to an F2X, again we're gonna make a separate guide, but the lug bolts are different. The second gen uses M14x1.25 bolts compared to the first gen's M12x1.5. In these guides, we normally touch on suspension and other mods that accompany fitment, and in the case of 1 Series, there isn't a lot of real estate under the front fenders. If you want to run wide wheels, you have to balance tire to spring perch and tire to fender clearance. You can either gain or lose precious space with different types of suspension, so that's important to bear in mind. For maximum clearance, the bottom spring perch on the front suspension needs to be above the tire. The factory suspension, while thick, has decent clearance because it uses short springs. A lot of the track-oriented high-end coilovers will have a longer spring and or use a helper spring, resulting in less clearance. KW, we're looking at you here. Base model springs are around 6.5 inches long, and you want your coilovers to have similar or shorter springs without helpers. In the picture that's behind me right now, Feel 441s are a good choice for clearance. They have a lot of it. A lot of suspension makers have the option of customizing spring length and spring rate. If your favorite coils come with springs that are too long, normally you can request something different in terms of spring rates and dimensions. And the best people to buy your suspension from, by the way, are threepiece.us, BC Racing coils, Forgestar coils. You can do all that on those. Highly recommend them. Now the first car we're looking at today is an E81, a BBS SR 18x8 plus 44 wheels. We're getting right into the cars on this one. No waiting. This one's got Pirelli P0s, 225/40 18s, and it's a square setup, lowered on Eibach Pro lowering springs, and guess what? No rubbing. Now just because the factory wheels come staggered doesn't mean you can't run a square wheel entire package. This 128 IM Sport is on a square set of BBSs. The only downside here is the 225/40 tires in the rear, which aren't going to provide a ton of grip, but it's a 128, you don't need it. If you have an N54 equipped car, on the other hand, you better go for some thicker rubber out back. You might write these wheels off as being too expensive considering they are BBSs, but the SRs are from the design line, a budget-conscious cast line of wheels. You can brag to all your boys about having real wheels while not breaking the bank and living on ice soup and ramen noodles. Next up, an E88 Vert on BC forged wheels, the RZ21s, to be specific, an 18x8 plus 35 and 18x9.5 plus 45. Continental Sport Contact 225/40 18s, which are a fantastic tire, and it's lowered on ST XT8 coilovers with a slight fender roll in the rear and a little bit less than 2 degrees of camber. Now this one's another 128i, but with a staggered wheel setup. The fronts are almost exactly the same, but with a 9mm lower offset, so 9 mils more poke. Now the rear is where things get different, 9.5 inch wides with a 45 offset. The tires are 255/35, which are much larger than stock 128 225/45s, but only one size wider than the factory 135 245/35. That's a lot of numbers. At this ride height, the rear needs a slight roll, but there's zero rubbing, and in the front there's a little bit of rubbing, but this is likely because the fenders are unrolled, which I'm going to touch on it a little bit more in the 1M section. The ST coilovers do have helper springs, which is probably why it's running lower offset front wheels to clear those. With these types of coilovers, you need wheels with less back spacing, meaning a skinnier width with with a lower offset to avoid hitting the front struts. Next up, you got an unholy marriage of JDM and European, a 1 Series coupe on Advan RZ2 18.8.5/35, 18.9.5 plus 50, Yokohama Apex V601s in 225/40 and 265/35 on ST XTA coilovers. The fenders are rolled, there's a little bit of rub in the rear, and 3 control arms in the front. 135i owners are probably asking what's the largest tire I can fit under the rear because the N54 can put out some jam. This one's running a 265/35/18, and that's as big as you can go on a non-M. Plan on rolling and possibly pulling the fenders depending on how much rubbing you're comfortable with. This one has slight rubbing during only the most spirited of driving, but to those who think it's unacceptable, roll it more. Advans are for JDM cars. Some of you might say, well, they look cool on Euros too, plus if every BMW had the same set of LMs, it would get a little stale, wouldn't it? Then we get an E88 on a fast FC04 17x8 plus 45 all around Firestone Indy 500 235/45 17s on M Sport suspension. This is an OEM Plus setup, no rolled fenders, no rubbing. This is a square setup featuring 17-inch wheels to prove it can be done. The width and offset are identical to the first square setup I showed you, but this one's got 235/45 17s in the rear, and despite this, the fenders did not need to be rolled, no rubbing, no scrubbing, no drama, no BS. We got a BMW on BBS is again CHRs to be specific, 19x8 plus 40, 19x9 plus 44. Wrapped up in Toyo Proxys 225/35 and 255/30 19s. KWV3 suspension, which is a fantastic coilover, and the fenders are unrolled with no rubbing. If you wanted a bigger wheel on your 1 Series, you could step up to 19s as seen on this car. This is not unfamiliar territory in terms of width and offset, as they are typical daily driver sizing that don't require special camber, fender rolling, or anything else to make it happen. This 2009 128i is on KWV3s, as I said, which are known to have clearance issues in the front. 8 with a 225 is as wide as you can go with this type of suspension, but the coilovers are going to make up for what you lose in tire grip. The KWV3s, I'll sing the bridge till the end of time. CHRs are a great option for mid-range name-brand wheels. They look awesome on any BMW. They're not as cheap as the SR, but neither are they as much as an LM. They're just a nice-looking, affordable mid-range wheel. Now, we couldn't do it to you without one stanced 1 Series, and this one's on Rotiform RSE, 18x9.5 plus 35 all around, wrapped up in Continental Extreme Contact 215/45/18 tire. This one's bagged on airlift performance suspension with adjustable arms, and there's no rubbing when it's aired up, but try driving it aired down. As is customary, we of course have to show you one example for the guys that want to stance their car in air suspension. This one's running an airlift performance kit, and with tight fitment like this, you're going to need to roll and possibly pull those fenders to make it happen. 9.5 would be far too wide for the front on a car that's just lowered, but in this case, they're wrapped in stretch 215/45 tires, which is fairly aggressive in terms of stretch. For flawless fitment, you're going to need adjustable arms and camber plates to dial it in. Expect a lot of trial and error to find the perfect amount of camber, and obviously performance is not the goal here, but the airbag kit does allow you to cruise without any rubbing, scrubbing, drama, anything like that. Air it up, drive, air it out, break necks. Now what about the 1M? Well, for the 7 people that own one because they're so darn rare, all bets are completely off as it has much wider fenders. You can tell by just looking at the Style 359 factory wheels, coming in at 19x9 plus 31 with a 245 and 19x10 plus 25 with a 265. The whole wheel and tire package is more aggressive than basically anything we're going to see on a 1 Series. To start, it comes with 19s. Besides the larger diameter, they are much lower offset, wider, and wrapped in larger, grippier tires to match. While it's possible to downsize to 18s, 17s are a hard no with the Brembo calipers. Most 1M owners prefer to stay with 19s, but 18s are popular among hardcore track enthusiasts for more grip, more sidewall, and lower tire costs. The OEM fitment's pretty good. BMW does a good job with that, so you don't need to go crazy with the specs on aftermarket wheels. A half-inch increase, little bit in the front and rear width with offsets between 20 and 30 works fantastic. The tires can be sized up to match 255 and 275/35. This is a direct fit, but if you want to add camber, roll fenders, and manipulate the car a little bit, you could go 285/30 or 35 in the back. Besides the fender being larger and the motor being a lot bigger, the 1M has a unique issue with rubbing the fender liners in the front, which also kind of happens on the regular 1 Series. It is even to happen with factory 18-inch winter wheels, such that BMW made a revised fender liner and offer warranty replacement on it. If you want to run more aggressive specs in the front, plan on either getting the liners replaced, doing it yourself, or ripping your fender liners out, whatever you're comfortable with. You will certainly need it with aftermarket wheels, and you might even need it with stocks. Now we're taking a look right now at a 1M on Forgestars. I personally love Forgestar Wheels. I think they're a great look in the CF5V in 19x9 plus 25, 19x10 10+20, wrapped up in Michelin Pilot Super Sport 255/35/19s and 275/35/19s out back on factory suspension. Looks really good and probably performs equally well. Has a little bit of rubbing, but they changed to the revised fender liners and it fits a little better. These are very similar to the OEM specs, and the wheels have slightly lower offsets and the tires are one size wider, but this is pretty reasonable for the 1M. The original fender liners were rubbing like crazy. With the updated liners, there are zero issues. Case in point to what I spoke to earlier. If you're getting aftermarket wheels, replace those fender liners, or again, just rip them out and throw them in the trash. So let's bring it all back together here, wrap it up for you. Fitment on these cars is a balancing act. Order wheels with too much back spacing, too low of an offset, you're gonna hit the suspension. Order wheels that are too aggressive, you're gonna have to throw camber at it to make it fit. In this guide, I focus on wheel and tire setups that are a direct fit, no rubbing, no scrubbing, no drama, no BS. I feel like there's a commercial that's like that. After all, these cars are super dialed in from the factory, and if BMW got it right, why change it? Now, if you're looking for wheels, we got them for pretty much any scenario, whether you want OEM Plus, daily driver, track car, stance car, heck, if you want to lift it and hit Glamis, we got you covered there. Once you nail the Fitment on your 1 Series, be sure to upload some pictures to our vehicle gallery to help others dial in their Fitment and just to show your 1 Series off. Thank you so much for watching, guys. This is Jake with threepiece.us, and I'll see you in the next one.